Welcome to another edition of the Membership World podcast. And I'm really delighted to have with me Robin Osterley, who is the CEO of the Charity Retail Association. Robin, we've known each other for a number of years, and it's so lovely to see you on the show today.
Yeah, well, great, and thanks very much for asking. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, great. So tell me a little bit about you, because you've been in the charity space and association area for quite some time now. Before you got into the CRA, what happened before?
Yeah, so well, I don't want to sound too much like an interview, but I started work an incredibly long time ago as a salesman, actually. I was selling office equipment. Ended up in the computer industry in sales and then in marketing, and decided in about the early 90s that it was not for me, really. I was fed up with kind of waking up in the morning and having to go and sell stuff to people who didn't really want it, and if we managed to sell it to them, it didn't really work. So I decided the IT business was not a great place to be. I'd always been involved in amateur music making, and decided to get into the arts. So after a little bit of a struggle, I ended up managing to break into arts organizations. And the first job in that kind of phase of my career was working for an outfit which is now called Making Music, which was a membership association that looks after amateur music organizations. And of course, those organizations are themselves, well, obviously organizations. So it was the federation thing, the idea of an association of organizations rather than people that I first got involved in. And that's quite sort of specialist, I think, in terms of membership associations. And certainly when you're dealing with charities, there's another specialism there. So I did 16 years at Making Music, which arguably was possibly a little bit long for both them and for me. But it kind of typecast me a bit as a membership association specialist. So when I left them, I joined an organisation in sport called Supporters Direct, which has now been merged into the Football Supporters Federation, I think. And that was a membership association that looked after supporters' trusts, which are a particular kind of supporter organisation. Did that for a year. Had to spend a bit of time removing the knives from my back after that, because there's a lot of football and people all want a piece of it. So that was an interesting year, but great fun. Sitting in the FA boardroom for 3 hours with Greg Dyke and chatting about football and talking about how we could make the life of the supporter a bit better. Really good fun, but didn't seem to work very well. It wasn't a great kind of synergy between them and me. So left them and then dished up at Charity Retail Association, which has been a fantastic home for the last nearly 10 years now, and which suit me very well. Again, a kind of federal model. So our members are the charities that own charity shops. Or lease charity shops, and what I like about the federal kind of idea is how diverse the membership is. So our largest member is Heart Foundation with 720 shops or something like that, and our smallest member would be someone with no shops at all, who's just looking to get into the business, or someone with only one shop, and kind of everything in between. So you've got this great diversity. If you're running the AA or something, your members have all got like 2 arms and 2 legs, and they all drive cars, and they all do pretty much the same thing. But in the case of a federation like us, all of our members are completely different, and that really keeps you on your toes. It keeps the world that you're operating in interesting. It means you've got to be fast on your feet, dealing with all sorts of different types of organizations. And I've really enjoyed that level of diversity. Not going to be doing it for that much longer, and I'm going to be retiring next year at some point. Not quite sure when, possibly as late as the end of next year, and that's 2026 for anyone who's listening after we've done this recording. So I should be retiring from full-time work at that point. But have really loved it. It's a great space to be in, and still managed to keep up with music at an amateur level. Still doing a fair bit of singing and conducting.
I never knew that about you. I never. That's the reason why we do podcasts. So I've only ever seen you as the CEO of the CRA. But that's great to hear. And so just delving a little bit deeper into that then, and you've obviously got a diverse mix of different organisations. How do you currently serve them? What are the sorts of reasons that people would want to join you?
Sure. Well, our little sort of elevator pitch is that we do 5 things for them. Basically, we lobby and do advocacy work on their behalf. So we work with the government, and we work with local authorities, and we work with lots of other organisations to try and make sure that the world of charity retail is as good as it could be for our members. Lots of unintended consequences always from legislation. People forget about charities, they forget about charity shops, and all sorts of things pop out the woodwork. And our job is to make sure that those things don't happen, or if they do, they're beneficial anyway. So that's one of the things we do to underpin that, and to provide our members with lots of opportunity to benchmark themselves. We do primary research. So the second thing we do is quite a lot of research amongst the membership to find out how they're doing in terms of sales. We've recently published a workforce report which shows how diverse or otherwise their workforce is, and how much they pay them, and the sorts of benefits they get. So all of that kind of research which they need to help locate themselves in the spectrum of charity retail and see how well they're doing compared to the others. We run a range of sort of what you might call basic member services, so advice and guidance. We have a primary authority relationship with Greater Manchester Council, who tell us what should happen in terms of health and safety, and in terms of HR practices and all of those kinds of things. So that's a whole range, the sort of things that most membership associations do, I guess. Just providing that basic information about how to do what you're doing as well as you can. Then fourthly, we provide them with an enormous number of opportunities to meet with one another, essentially, either just for networking purposes or in special interest groups. And as you know, Gordon, because you've been to it a couple of times, we have a very large-scale annual conference, which takes place at the end of June, and which tends to involve nearly a third of our membership. Last year, I mean, we're on the cusp of hitting 400 paying delegates for that. Last year we had 380 or something. So it's very big, and it is the highlight of most charity retailers' years. It's really the only opportunity to get to let their hair down a bit as well, working for charities. But they do learn a lot, and we have a whole range of great speakers. And we also run the Charity Retail Awards at that event, which is a sort of industry-based awards celebrating all that is good in charity retail. So that's the fourth thing. And the final thing we do is we run a joint venture training company with one of our corporate members, and jointly we provide a large range of largely online training courses, which are very, very specific to charity retail. They're tailored completely to the world in which we're operating. So they're unique in that respect, because nobody else doing that kind of thing. And that's the fifth thing we do. So that, broadly speaking, it's those 5 things that people join us for, and remain in membership.
Yeah, that's amazing. And obviously you're right, I've been to a couple of them, and they seem to be super engaged, because I think sometimes when you're running a charity, rather, you can be quite isolated, can't you? Live it, and it's not until you come together and you say, well, actually, that's a really good idea of solving that problem or this problem. And I like the fact that you do the sort of benchmarking and research. It's so critical for people to understand, where they can drive their organizations forward. But I mean, we're living in a bit of uncertain times at the moment, and I just wondered, presumably some of those charities may be having a tough old time, and I just wondered how. And I remember you were telling me during the pandemic, when a lot of the shops were shut, that was a really painful experience for a lot of them, and you lobbied hard for that. What are some of the things that you're seeing now in terms of the sector itself?
So actually, just harking back to our conference, which was at the end of June this year, because a couple of months ago, we called it Challenging Times Creative Solutions.
Nice.
And the thing is that, we're quite a small operation. There's only 10 of us, and none of us are retailers. None of us trained as retailers. None of us, are actually involved in retail activity. So our job, we don't see our job really as to tell them what to do or how to do it. We see our job as to disseminate information and disseminate best practice in particular, and put them together with one another so that they can share ideas. And what's really interesting about this, I think, is that the largest organisations, the big four charity retailers, are obviously the British Heart Foundation, Barnardo's, Cancer Research UK, and Oxfam. And those guys are enormous organisations, £500 million turnover operations and so on. So, and they're very well resourced, certainly compared to CRA. They have a huge amount of resources at their disposal. And obviously they are, in lots of different ways, experts. So their insights to customer behaviour, for example, would be far more sophisticated than ours. So there's not much point in us trying to duplicate that activity. It's much better for us to use them to disseminate what they've learned to the rest of the membership. And what's one of the really interesting things about our sector is that people are fantastically willing to share information. They all see themselves in pretty much the same boat. And so they don't see themselves really in competition with one another. They see themselves as part of a network, part of a family, and they want other members of the family to succeed. So we do get an enormous amount of traction from the large ones, and they help us in all sorts of ways to disseminate information to the smaller ones. But, and this is the really interesting point, I think, they also learn from the smaller ones, because the smaller ones are able to be much faster on their feet. They can be more creative. They're not so constrained by management inertia, put it that way. They can make decisions very quickly. They can try things out without there being a huge bureaucracy involved in trying to get things done. So actually, quite often it's two ways. It's not just the little ones learning from the big ones with all the resource. It's also the big ones gaining new creative ideas from the little ones. And I think when times are tough, that becomes even more important. And actually, I was really quite worried this year, because it has been a really difficult time for charity retail over the last kind of 18 months. Absolutely. And I was really worried this year about the fact that, whether that nobody would come to conference, because it's not cheap to come to conference. It costs them 350 quid or something it's a 24-hour thing. It costs them 350 quid to come. It's not a cheap exercise, but actually we're fine in terms of numbers, because people were just really keen to come along and see what creative solutions we could come up with during the course of the conference, which I think we did, actually, certainly judging by the evaluations. We used lots of different techniques to come up with a variety of different solutions and thoughts. We also have a big trade association attached to the conference, which is very important. We have something like 80 corporate members, and they all come and exhibit at our conference. So it's a ready-made place for our members to go to see potentially new solutions coming from these various different suppliers. So there's really loads of reasons why they should go in order to try and better their loss. And I think that's the answer to your question, really. In order to provide that kind of input, we put them together with each other and with our corporate members, and between them they come up with all these amazing creative solutions, which we're then able to document and disseminate later in terms of best practice.
Yeah, amazing. And I actually had a quick look at your exhibitor list. It's quite extensive, actually, really covering all sorts of different solutions. So I guess even if things were tough, they may cut back on certain things, but actually, because you're delivering so much in a 24-hour period, then if that is the only expense that they give you plus the membership, it's worthwhile. So that's a good lesson to take away with you. That's great. But what else are we seeing with innovations within charity at the moment? I mean, obviously the whole retail sector has changed. More and more people are buying online. Unfortunately, the high street in certain places is becoming, well, I mean, dare I say, it's the coffee shops and charity shops in some cases. But what I mean is that a place where you think that charities can also be a place where people come to community to meet, to come on a regular? I guess there are regular customers that come in. I think some of them do like refreshments and things, and are really starting to be quite innovative in what they do. Love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, I don't like you use the word starting. They've been doing these kinds of things for quite some time, actually, and for many years now, charity shops have been seeing themselves and have been effectively, working as community hubs. So they're places where people can go in the community and feel comfortable, feel at ease. It's not like going to a normal shop where you're chased around by a security guard, wondering if you're going to steal something. It's a completely different kind of vibe, and that can be extended in lots of different ways. So maybe you are offering a portal to your charity services. Maybe, as you say, you're offering cafe space so that people can sit down and talk about things. Which might, in the case of Cancer Research UK's new, well, it's not that new actually, now it's been over a few years, their large, huge superstore in Stevenage. They've got consulting rooms in the back where people can go and talk to people about cancer on themselves and on their families. So there's lots of that kind of innovation has been going on for some time, really. And you're right that high streets are changing, and some are in decline and some are on the up, and charity shops have got a huge part to play in that regeneration process. In fact, I've been talking to the City of Sunderland for some time, and who have been quite keen to actually use charity shops to almost front their whole regeneration activity, because it's charity shops that bring footfall into the high street to a large extent. Plenty of high streets you go to, nobody shopping anywhere apart from in the charity shops. So they are providing that. They're providing that kind of anchor role that the large stores, many of whom have gone out of business, are no longer providing. And that does make it a very community-based activity. The vast majority of people who work in charity shops, whether they're staff or volunteers, walk to work. They are local. They are people who know each other and who know the customer base and who can provide a friendly smile and all that sort of stuff that you don't get in any number of different retail outlets we could name. So I think this is part of the reason why they're doing very well still. Sales are fine, by the way, and sales are really good. Trading is generally speaking has been fairly flat over the last year, but from a very strong base, and now seems to be picking up a bit more in terms of like for like. What's really hurting them and making things very challenging is the costs and consequent reduction in their profitability, and not therefore being able to provide the same kind of income to the charities as they previously were. But in terms of trading, they're very strong. So people are still really keen to shop in charity shops, and they're very keen to donate as well. Donations are also strong, but it's profitability that is being hurt by significant cost pressures. So they're doing really a very good job still in terms of providing that community focus and that sense of destination that a lot of people have. I'm going charity shopping today, and I think that's a really important part of what they do.
Yeah, and it's also look, we've seen the rise of things like Vinted and other places, haven't we? Because clearly people are now realizing that you can give back, and this I think particularly amongst younger folk, they don't want to be seen to be throwing things away. So I think there's probably a big growth in donations, as you were saying, which is really fascinating. Good, great insights there. So, as you say, you are retiring next year, and you look back sort of fondly. What are the things that you think you personally have learned as a CEO over that sort of period? And what advice perhaps would you give to your younger self, perhaps entering the world of managing associations?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I think I think one thing that I've learned. Let me give you a specific example, because you mentioned the pandemic earlier, and I don't know if many people who listen to this call had a similar sort of experience, but we found that all of a sudden, whereas people have been using us to come to special interest groups and that kind of stuff, all of a sudden they were desperate for guidance and real genuine leadership, because they weren't getting it from anywhere else. The government was kind of frantic, trying to sort out basic kind of issues, and the various different bits of guidance they gave about the legislation they put in place, for example, closing shops or reopening shops and things like that. Inevitably, and I'm not trying to make a political point here. I'm not blaming the government, really. Inevitably, what the material they were producing was inadequate for people to actually understand comprehensively what they were expected to do. And the reason for that is no one knew what they were expected to do. So they came to us and said, what should we do about this? And obviously we've got links into government, and we spent a fair bit of time talking to them, but even they were so up against it that it was really difficult for them to provide that kind of guidance. So we just made some of it up. We made some of it up using our knowledge and expertise, and the knowledge and expertise of people that we knew, to say, should people be doing this, or would it be better if they did that? And we issued our own guidance. And there were colleagues of mine in the world of civil society who thought we were being reckless, actually, because they thought, well, that could be wrong. But I had this innate sense that some kind of decision here was going to be necessary, and being decisive was actually more important than even being right sometimes.
Right, absolutely.
I like to think most of the time we got it right. I'm sure there were one or two times when we didn't, but for me, so what I learned from that is, in those situations, you've got to be brave. You can't wait 3 weeks to get an answer from a civil servant who, frankly, has no better answer than you do. You might as well. Well, the answer you'll probably get is something like, do a risk assessment, or well, it's up to you. I can't legislate for what your members' trustees should think. So that's the answer you're going to get after a 3-week wait, and you might as well just say something without bothering for the 3-week wait. And so we were quite brave, I think. And I was quite proud of the way we responded to that. And we got fantastic feedback from our members, because they said, well, if it hadn't been for you, we wouldn't have known what to do. And there's a kind of big thing about an association providing that sort of family leadership, if you like, saying, well, okay, do it this way. If it doesn't work, you can blame us, you can say, well, CRA told us to do this, and then we'll take it. And the reason we'll take the heat is because we would then be able to say, well, we asked, but no one told us. So we had to come up with an answer. So it was providing that level of that sort of extra layer between us and the legislator, between our members and the legislators, which took the heat off them and enabled them to get on with their work and just do what we were told. We produced 2 or 3 opening packs, which were 80 to 100 pages long, based on everything that we possibly knew and had been able to glean from our members. We had weekly board meetings where we discussed what we should be doing, and what thoughts we should be presenting to our membership. So it became a collective action, And you know, I need hardly say one of the whole points of an association is to provide that collective strength and collective knowledge and understanding, so that people can't come at you and say, as an individual organization, say you're doing this wrong. It's the collective that counts. So I think I learned that really, that you know, that it was good to be brave, and it was good to be to provide that collective force. And that's when the force of a collective really becomes obvious, when times are as tough as that.
Absolutely. I mean, and I think also, you know, trying to please everybody all of the time is a thankless task. It's almost impossibility. There's always going to be somebody that will say, "Oh, I don't agree with the CRA on this," or whatever. You know, but you have to, particularly if you've even got disagreements amongst the board, you've got to be true to yourself. And I absolutely agree with what you said about leadership, and that's where I think a whole trade association comes to its own, not just in terms of government lobbying, but actually in taking those difficult decisions. So I love what you've done about that. You know, that sort of advice that was very relevant, because during the pandemic, of course, it was quite, you know, all things to all people. And you know, and I remember somebody I interviewed that was in the estate agency industry, and they were saying, yes, but you know, we're an estate agent. We need to have this language in our terms. And I remember the guy I was speaking to said 20,000 people came onto their webinar, biggest ever attendance to their webinars during that, for the same reasons that you just articulated, to be honest. So great stuff, Robin. Thank you so much for taking the time to have a chat with me on the Membership World podcast. How can people find out more about the CRA, what you do, and perhaps yourself as well?
Well, you know, I'm going to just say the cliche thing and go look at our website, www.charityretail.org.uk. Charity Retail is all one word. It's actually a brand new website, so it should be all nice and up to date and easy to navigate and so on. You're more than welcome to get in touch, you know, with us if there's anything specific you'd like to do. Yeah, I mean, we're reasonably visible these days, and it's you know, all that information is in the public domain, so people are very, very welcome to be in touch.
Great. Thanks, Robin.